which soon had the country in dire straits. The political strategy has not changed. And so today, here, what we have heard from the two opposition senators speaking in tandem for the first time, and I commend in particular Senator Walters, but I understand he is driven by two considerations. One, that it is almost lunch and he hopes to steal chicken off of somebody's plate. And two, with the triumph or the acquittal of a certain colleague, he knows that he is in dire straits in the constituency in which he hopes to run. So he is driven by a level of personal fear. And for him, you see him speaking in a do or die kind of way. Well, the other one, who found it possible to be part of a campaign in which the level of insult thrown at a former colleague in this place, stressing on height and girth. I was a little shocked that he tolerated it, being half the height and twice the girth, if you do the ratio studies of the colleague, but it was allowed. And I understand that the erstwhile leader of the Democratic Labour Party has some intention to go to St. John. So you know, Fluffy may be in a little trouble in terms of choices. So we want to look, therefore, at some of the questions, some of the issues that were raised, and perhaps give some answers. I take the point of the correlation between high crime and economic deterioration. That cannot be gainsaid. It is difficult. It is easy to say, let the government do something. The government has to do something. Hang them, pay the police more. All of these are the mantras that one is hearing, but they're easy. They are easy in the context of a society where government has put multiple measures in place to address crime, from legislation to increasing prosecutions to judges and prosecutors being increased, to courts being increased to deal with criminal matters, to putting more police on the street, to giving them headquarters and stations and equipment and vehicles of which they were deprived when the Democratic Labour Party was in office. We have used social intervention measures, and the problem persists because it is not easily solved. It persists because there is a pandemic of crime sweeping the Caribbean. And I say this, Barbados, despite our challenges, continues to have one of the lowest crime rates in the Caribbean. It is remarkable that we feel a high sense of angst, and with the repetition that crime is bad, something has to be done, and with every publication, true or false, of somebody saying, a man chased me today. The man chasing you because you drop a $20 bill and he's trying to hang it to you, but your mind is so caught up with the fact that crime is high, and if you see a man near you, you have to be careful, or this and that. So we hear now how bad crime is constantly, and I'm not suggesting that we do not have a problem, we do. But I want some of the people who are saying the government should do something to make suggestions of things that have not yet been tried. I want some of the people who are saying the government should do something and have the guns hidden under them when the grandmothers who have the guns hidden when the police come to search for them, the aunties who have the guns and the weapons under their wig, and in their wheelchair, they are the ones who have to help do something. Those who know where some of the wrongdoers are have to say something. We have to unite as a society and work with government and the police if we plan to address the crime issue. But where you have a situation where people don't want to work, unemployment is the part of the lowest in history. You have people who tell you openly they don't want any hard work. You have people who tell you they have no skills, but they tell you that the job, a blue-collar job, does not pay them enough and they prefer to stay home. When they stay home, how do you think they're planning to get money? You have every employer complains about productivity and attitudes in the workplace. We really have a problem that is wider. It is manifesting itself partly in the crime situation, but it is much wider than that. And it didn't start in 2018. This is something that has been boiling on a low heat for a long time. When you could hear from a professional that 95% of the people in prison charged with violent crimes read at the level of 3 years old, it means that our school system is not identifying people with problems who really will come out not only with low skills but low self-esteem and be incapable of getting work in the workplace. But yet there are those, even though the common entrance eliminates children, eliminates futures, and eliminates opportunity, there are those like the leader of the opposition who says, keep it. So it doesn't matter how many poor people's children are. Make no mistake, it is the poor people whose children may not be naturally brilliant, because the ones who are bright are going to get through. But the ones who are not naturally brilliant, who are at work and don't go to the PTA meetings, who are on the block and don't talk to the teachers, who don't want to negotiate or converse, and some of whom cannot afford to send children to lessons, the multiple lessons that the middle class people who can read, expose their children to newspapers and to all kinds of things, help them with fractions and algebra and English, and still turn around and send them to multiple lessons. So it is poor people that are being disadvantaged by the common entrance exam. It is the fact that we grew up with praying mothers and were forced to go to Sunday school and church, where we were taught certain values, including the value for life. But now we don't do that. We don't send our children to church or Sunday school. We don't go ourselves. And a lot of young people you hear them say all that, I don't care about nobody. I don't care about this and I don't care about that. And in fact, they also don't care about life. They don't care about the value of anybody's life, and the reality is they don't care about their own, because they don't expect to live long. So they want to live hard and fast. And so let us, when we talk about crime, I saw in a country that I will not name, here in the Caribbean, one weekend, a small shop, a few people gone in to buy a few things, 6 people gunned down in one go, 4 bodies on the ground dead. You know, so we have a pandemic in the Caribbean. We have a problem in the Caribbean. And the answer is not getting up and cursing the government, because as my mother used to say, when you sow the wind, you reap the whirlwind. And when you come to government, and albeit a long time from now, if the pandemic persists, the same population is going to say, let the government do something. And therefore, the nature of the conversation that we have to have is, what are the social structural problems that need to be addressed How do we teach conflict resolution skills? How do we get into the communities and deal with the challenges? How do we stop the boy or girl from picking up the gun in the first place? Because when they have it in hand, you can't save them. So the interventions have to come before. I want to turn then to some of the economic issues or the financial issues which were raised. What is the government doing with the money? The government is doing roads and buying garbage trucks and buses, COVID cushioning. Well, we had to use loans because the Dems left no money. So let's start. And if you wanted to deal with that issue, if you want to deal with the problems in the country, there's a point at which you have to have loans. One, the problem is not the loans, because people borrow and governments borrow. The question is whether or not the economy is growing, and it is. The question is whether or not the debt is unsustainable, and the debt is sustainable. When we came to government, our debt profile was 179% of GDP. It is now 115%. So there are less loans or less loan repayments to being done now than there were before. If you have a loan that are loans that are 179% of your income, and then you reduce it to 115%, it means that you have a lot more money available to you because your financial position, your fiscal position, your economic position is better. We have given civil servants salary increases that they did not have in 10 plus years. The whole QEH&E has been revamped and several departments upgraded. The NIS that the Dems did not pay, the VAT returns that people did not get, the monies owed to citizens, ordinary poor people, small business people, not just big business, that people's businesses were on the verge of collapse. Government has repaid and given money back, paid VAT, paid VAT returns. We have stopped printing money, which undermined the economy completely under the Democratic Labour Party. It is a huge fiscal and economic error to print money, decried by serious economists, and it was the principal operating methodology of the Democratic Labour Party. That has been stopped. We dealt with the South Coast sewage project, our sewage system, and improved Bridgetown. There has not been a stink out in town since 2018 when we came to government. Prior to that, you could not drive through town every other week. Town was so foul that the people who live around there, all those surrounding communities, Chapman Lane and so on, could not sleep at night. Little children with rhinotracheal and bronchial and related conditions had serious problems. And we saw, people will not forget the photographs of the trees, full trees, growing up in the containers that were supposed, containers is a loose word, the tanks, thank you, that were supposed, and pumpkins. Well, I don't know who ate them, but pumpkins. So that we are in a much better, so when you try to suggest that things are bad, the fact that government is able to do all of these things, service and reduce its debt, shows that the economy really is in good shape. I haven't even got to the fact that we had 20 plus downgrades of the economy under the Democratic Labour Party, and right now we have been having upgrade after upgrade after upgrade. And this loan, I don't care how cheap money is. People do not risk their money foolishly. People only risk their money when they expect to get a return. So if the interest is up in the air and people do not feel they are going to get a return on it, they are not going to line up to lend it to you. And this the fact that there were 90 plus international bond investors trying to lend Barbados money speaks to the fact that there has been significant restoration of confidence in the Barbados economy and in the way in which it is being run and managed, including its debt profile. So it is not a fact that things are bad and people coming to borrow money or lend money just because they will get a good return, because people are not going to be reckless with their money. The last government, if they were willing to pay rates as high as the central bank or whatever is the highest building in Barbados, nobody was prepared to lend them money. That is why they looted the NIS. The NIS fund was looted. Honorable Senator Walter speaks about the problems with the NIS. The problems in the NIS originated because the fund was looted by the Democratic Labour Party to the extent that when you needed money from NIS as a Barbadian, you could not get it. You could not get it. But now, people are getting their NIS monies. The age for NIS or for retirement was increased, not because the government owes NIS money, but because the number of people in the workforce are reducing because of changes in population dynamics. People are living much longer with chronic non-communicable diseases, which are a high charge on the fund. And all over the world, NIS funds, or whatever they're called, some don't call them NIS, they may call them their Social Security Fund or National Security Fund and so on. All of them in major developed countries, even with sound economic management, are now encouraging people to work till as much as 70 years old because of a similar challenge. The fact that you have shrinking population size, fewer numbers in the workforce to pay NIS, and high demands because of chronic non-communicable diseases. This loan will eliminate the need to repay principal to the IMF from July 2025 to June 2027. It will reduce the borrowing rate, or the government borrowing, from 505% of the quota to 395%. It therefore gives us room for emergency borrowing. Senator Kevin Boyce asked the question, why now? The answer to the question, why now, has to do with the fact that there are wars and rumors of wars. There is saber rattling and there are bombs dropping. The level of uncertainty in the global economy makes it mandatory for the government to go to the marketplace to secure its fiscal position in the event that there is an international crisis and rates escalate. That's the simple answer. You do not wait until, if the car wobbling, the wheels wobbling, the engine sputtering, and things are going wrong, you do not wait till the car breaks down in the middle of the rain and say, Lord, have mercy, I never got an umbrella. You go and you get your loan and put yourself in a position to protect yourself. The government is protecting the country by going to the marketplace, giving itself, and going to the marketplace in a situation where there is improved confidence by investors, where our reputation is improved and we are in a position to borrow, where people have respect for the country, and where the escalation of international crises could so jeopardize your economy or your country that you have to cushion yourself against the economic uncertainty. I cannot answer the legitimate question as to what should be the new standard for your foreign exchange reserves. I'm not an economist. But what I do know as a Bajan, as an observer, as a student of life, of politics, I don't call myself a student of economics, but I watch on from the distance. The global uncertainty in which we live now makes it imperative that you have a larger degree of cushion than would have been required before, because the period of shocks are long and severe. And on top of that, these exogenous economic shocks, whether they are catalyzed by war or by trade wars, we are also compounded with environmental shocks. The fact that we are seeing environmental crises of a very serious sort and extreme weather events of the most severe type with far more frequency than we did before. And that is true throughout the Caribbean. And therefore, if you have your eye on your externalities, irrespective of how rapidly the economy is growing, if you have your eye on the international markets, irrespective of how low your unemployment is, if you have your eye on the circumstances which you do not control, you would put yourself in a position to have additional security in the event that the worst comes to the worst. Trinidadians have a wonderful saying: when your neighbor's house on fire, wet your own. And that is what the government is attempting to do. It is looking at the international circumstances and saying, the economy is doing extremely well, unemployment is very low. We are getting upgrades of our economy. The economy is growing. Yes, food prices are high, but food prices are not high in Barbados alone. A cart of eggs in the United States, where they subsidized farming, was like 40 or 50 US. So food prices are high all over the world, and despite all of the measures that this government has put in place to cushion the public, to keep prices as low as they possibly can by engaging with supermarkets, by dealing with matters of freighting, by reducing taxes and costs that would impact the average person, food prices and the cost of living will remain high. But inflation in Barbados is again among some of the lowest in the Caribbean. So that even though we are facing high prices, the reality is that many of our neighbors are facing higher, and we do not, and they do not have things in place like a minimum wage to protect the poor, as we have twice now intervened in the marketplace. And woe on those employers and their financial advisors who cut people's time, to increase profits for big business people at the expense of the small man and poor man whose situation they parrot and trumpet hypocritically. Woe to financiers, to the financial advisors who do that. I very rarely eat burgers. Mr. President, sir, gas prices, well, I'm not going to touch that because that is my colleague's portfolio and therefore she can better speak to the issue. But again, gas prices in the Caribbean and the Pacific are the highest in the world. I'm going to repeat that. Gas prices in the Caribbean and the Pacific are the highest in the world because we are way outside major centers of production. Our status as small island developing states means that we cannot create economies of scope or scale. The markets are too small to be attractive to suppliers, and then you have to send the product long distances to reach the Pacific Islands and to reach Caribbean Islands. So our gas prices are amongst the highest in the world. I'm sure the minister will speak to the mechanisms that government has put in place to keep gas prices down. And I'm saying this, were it not, and I hope that we are going to have a debate which will allow us to explore these things in detail, were it not for the interventions of this administration in the marketplace, things would be a lot worse. And given our experience with the Democratic Labour Party, were there in government, we would be on the verge of collapse. And the dollar which they had threatened to devalue, which is again very strong, would have gone through the editors, sir. It would have get liquor. It won't have the value, sir. So it is all right for the opposition with ease, with ambition beyond ability, to get up and say, the government must do something. Where's the money going? This is too high and that is too high. Why don't you deal with it? It is easy. But let us now separate rhetoric from reality. Let us now come to the fact where we look at the measures which are being used to manage the country and to manage the economy that are being applauded internationally and by people who are reasonable and not rash, who understand the dynamics that are driving an economy and the externalities that, try as you might, you have over which you really have no control. The point is, what do you control and that you can address? And the government has been doing its utmost, not just to invest heavily in tourism, but to diversify the economy, even to the extent now, sir, of promising to go into pharmaceutical production, which we anticipate will make significant difference to our foreign exchange earnings. Mr. President, I know that my time has expired and I therefore want to express gratitude and end by saying, sir, that when you look at the loan, and market conditions have changed, and that is why the interest rate is higher. But when you do the cost-benefit analysis, and you look ahead at what is on the horizon, the serious social and economic rain clouds which have already started the deluge, the government has taken steps to ensure that we have an economic umbrella which protects our society, sir. And I therefore am happy to give my support to the measure before the chamber. I'm much obliged to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Your Honor, Most Honorable Senator Thompson. Senator Cummins, please wrap up.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I want to thank all of the colleagues who have spoken, and I want to, as is my custom, go through the responses as I am able to give them. But before I do that, I want to acknowledge the presence here in the chamber with us for the benefit of those in particular who are like, as another colleague once said in another place, Lilliputians waiting in tall grass. We have here among us today the chief debt strategy analyst from the Ministry of Finance, who has been here with us and providing guidance on this debate. So I want to get into the substance of my responses at this time, Mr. President. No, Mr. President, I believe that my colleague, Senator Nichols, has aptly dispensed both after the fact and in advance of the submissions from the Democratic Labour Party representatives in this honorable chamber. Senator Walters, who continues, as I believe Senator Thompson said, to have ambitions that exceed his ability, has attempted to mislead this chamber and the public of Barbados. And I believe that the tax rebate may be in the mail for Senator Worrell, based on his contribution. So, Mr. President, let me get into the meat of the matter, because the big book, as was referred to by the leader of the opposition in the other place, is an interesting thing. And it is important that we must learn how to read the big book, and we must know what is in it. Now, Table 8 of the big book shows the balance between domestic and foreign financing. Now, I was happy, on one hand, to hear Senator Worrell make reference to the external financing sources in Table 8. But what troubled me was that he mentioned the Caribbean Development Bank, which is not mentioned in Table 8, but in fact the Caribbean Development Fund. And in this honorable chamber, the Caribbean Development Fund, as opposed to the Caribbean Development Bank, the Caribbean Development Fund in Table 8, at the beginning of, which is where the financing, sources of financing is captured. We came to this honorable chamber, I believe last year, or maybe earlier this year, and we passed a resolution. And we passed a resolution for the financing from the Caribbean Development Fund to take very specific actions, Mr. President. What were those actions? And I believe Senator Thompson spoke about them without making reference to the actual source of financing. The source of financing to deal with the Bridgetown Sewage Treatment Plant is captured in Table 8 under the Caribbean Development Fund. We passed a resolution in this chamber to support that source of financing, Mr. President, to take the sewage off the streets in Table 8. Table 8 on the page, I think it's page 8.
On a point of order, Mr. President, I will, here to stop Senator Cummins, but I never referred to Table 8, and I did refer to the Caribbean Development Bank. It had nothing to do with the Caribbean Development Fund.
Please continue, Senator Cummins.
I assure you that those on this side know the difference between the two. What is captured in Table 8 is, in fact, the Caribbean Development Fund, indeed. And so I'm referring to Caribbean Development Fund on Table 8. The loan that was passed in this honorable chamber, captured in Table 8 under the Caribbean Development Fund, is for the purpose of treating to the Bridgetown Sewage Plant. And I want to specifically outline what that is. Component 1 involves installing centralized Bridgetown sewage treatment.
Mr. President, again, on a point of order.
Yeah, what's the point of order?
I referred to the Caribbean Development Bank Fund, Barbados First Program, Programmatic Fiscal Stability, Growth and Social Protection Policy-Based Loan, Mr. President. There's a front and a back part to the book.
And what page or table was that, Senator Worrell?
Mr. President, it's Appendix C. Okay. Right, the statement of public debt as of the 31st of December 2024.
Thank you very much. Please press on, Senator Cummins.
The honorable senator is too eager because I'm coming to the Caribbean Development Bank in a minute, but I'm speaking first and foremost for the Caribbean Development Fund. It is the source of financing to address the sewage that the Democratic Labour Party left on the streets of this country and the stench to which Senator Thompson just referred. Now, the CAF financing, which was mentioned as well, that financing, where is the money going, Mr. President? To build the roads, all of the roads that Barbadians can see with their own two eyes. That is the source of financing from CAF. Now, Mr. President, under the Inter-American Development Bank, now I want to spend 2 minutes on the Inter-American Development Bank because the majority of the financing under the IDB, those were inherited loans that came from the Democratic Labour Party, the tourism plan, the tourism project, the Maze Replacement Project, all of those projects, some of them 8+ years overdue and unimplemented. The Competitiveness Project, all of those projects unimplemented for the most part and had to be extended. They remained on our books, Mr. President. Those are among the loans that are now consolidated within the references that were made to the Inter-American Development Bank. Equally so, Mr. President, the Bank of China, Exim Bank of China, we also know that there were roles under the Complant facility to do what? 2 things. 1, to construct the Wyndham Hotel, then known as Sam Norris Castle, started by who? The Democratic Labour Party, finished by us, Mr. President. That includes the financing. So I was happy for the honourable member to begin the process of listing the sources of external financing because the bulk of it is external, is inherited debt. The Caribbean Development Bank, Mr. President, the Caribbean Development Bank, we also had financing under the CDB, and I want to get into the specifics of the CDB financing. The CDB financing as well, Mr. President, we had several facilities under the CDB, and a significant number of those were also inherited. And as a matter of fact, in 2018, when we went through the debt restructuring, under the debt restructuring, the CDB was perhaps the only institution that had provisions within its loan facility that obstructed the government from undertaking a restructuring exercise in the same way. And so the Adams International Airport runway rehabilitation project, that was financed under the Caribbean Development Bank. Harson's Cave at that point also came under the Caribbean Development Fund and a range of additional things. So there were several facilities captured and were restructured. So when you see them amalgamated and listed, there are multiple facilities, some new, some old, all having to be repaid. But I want to then get into some specifics now, Mr. President, on the actual repayment of the debt, because if the argument is being made that we are not repaying our debt, Mr. President, I want to start with 1, a debt restructuring as at 2018, and then I want to go into what happened post-2019 and what the government spent on, expenditure on. $10 million to the Welfare Department to meet the additional cost of grants to individuals. $10 million additional to the Welfare Department. $10 million on top of that to the Household Survival Program and $10 million to the Adopt a Family Program to provide cash transfers to support vulnerable families as a result of the economic fallout of the pandemic. There was $3.5 million provided to the National Assistance Board to establish community elderly care facilities. $48.8 million for the management of COVID to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. $10.7 million to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital as well to support current operations. To the Transport Board, because you can see the buses. So when we're talking about expenditure, where the government is spending the money, $23.8 million to the Transport Board. And we have seen buses year on year on year roll out in the country. This country does not need the Democratic Labour Party to look and play Houdini with what we have spent money on. You can see it with your own two eyes, Mr. President. $10.0 million during COVID, to provide laptops and tablets to persons who could not afford it to assist with online classes. Now, this was in the fiscal framework, Mr. President, of, let me make sure I get the year right. This is 23, 24, going backwards. So I want to come forward to the 25, 26 framework. The 25, 26 Ms. framework we talk about what's happening at a sectoral level, whether there's growth or not. Mr. President, long-stay tourist arrivals increased by 17.9% in 2024. This was fueled by a couple of things, including the investment in ICC Men's Cricket World Cup. Key markets, we saw significant growth, including hotel rates increasing with occupancy levels. The construction sector grew by 7.1% in that same year, and there were a number of ongoing public infrastructure projects. Agriculture, despite the pronouncements of two members of this opposition side, experienced growth by 5.4% in 2024, despite some declines in some food crops as a result of weather challenges.
Senator Cummings is misleading the chamber by stating the increase in visitor arrivals for 2024, you have to compare it to the decline that you had over the COVID period. Tourism arrivals in this country only reached the pre-COVID level last year. So that cannot count.
Mr. President, I'm not with yield to any future interruptions at this point, because the honourable member had his time and he did not add any value then, and he's not adding any value now, Mr. President. So I don't need the honourable member to tell me what happened during COVID. I was the Minister of Tourism during COVID, though. I know what happened, and there was a 73% decline, but I also know, Mr. President, that we have recovered to 2019 levels already, Mr. President, and that we are seeing a further growth. Mr. President, we are managing bread shops in here. There's a whole sector, Mr. President.
Mr. President, on a point of order, I hate to interrupt the speaker again, but yes, she was the Minister of Tourism, and we only returned to pre-COVID levels last year, lagging behind the rest of the Caribbean, who had returned more than a year or two in advance.
Mr. President, that is not a point of order. If the honourable member wants to speak,
Mr. President.
The world has the floor, please.
I don't hear.
It shows, Mr. President, that our tourism sector is underperforming and is less competitive than our neighbors. That is the issue.
Thank you for your speech. It was not a point of order. Senator Cummings, please continue.
Mr. President, I believe that, just to be clear, the honourable member, when he interrupted me for the umpteenth time again, to yet grandstand again, that he said that last year, 2024, we did not recover in tourism until last year. I am certain that I am referring to 2024 numbers. So maybe there's a disparity in the honourable member's understanding of what last year refers to. Last year's 2024? No, Mr. President, let's move on. Labour market conditions also improved with the unemployment rate, Mr. President, in 2024, last year, decreasing to 6.9%. In this year, Mr. President, you have heard in the central bank figures that it has further declined, and it is at 6.2%. The Deputy Speaker spoke earlier, Mr. President, and she spoke about the debt to GDP ratio. We had the debt to GDP ratio last year fell to 104% of GDP, and I believe we also heard from the Honourable Prime Minister in the other place that this financial year, this year, 2025, it is expected to decline to double digits, down from 104%, Mr. President. We were the third high, and the Honourable Deputy President is correct. She is reminding me that we were the third highest indebted country in the world, in the weeds with people like Greece and so on that had Europeans to buy them out. And we have now come to 104% of GDP in 2024 with an expected decline in 2025 to dip to double-digit levels. That is economic management, and you can see what this government is doing, Mr. President. And now, I want to come back to some of the additional questions that were raised, and I understand the questions that were raised by Senator Boyce, and I want to respond to them. Now, Mr. President, there were two numbers that were given, one by Senator Walters and one by Senator Boyce. Senator Boyce projected what he expected it to be. And we have seen from the fiscal management team that this operation is meant to reduce the government of Barbados's total debt service by approximately 16%, 16%, for the remainder of 2025 and from 2026, and then from 2027 through the end of 2029, it is expected to reduce it by 7% on top of what we have just described. This is what has come in from the analysts and the experts who have projected what Barbados's debt service is going to be. But I want to just close on the last 2 points, Mr. President. When we talk about taxing ourselves out of debt, this government has brought successive budgets, much to the annoyance of the opposition, even when their previous president, before he was ousted, and then the current president, since he has submerged to the top, they always, at all instances, projected as we approach budget periods that there was going to be an increase in taxation. It has not yet happened. It has not yet been realized. There has not yet been an increase in taxation, and yet they persist, Mr. President, in making these projections as to what they expect to happen, and they have not yet been right. So this government has brought a non-tax increase budget for multiple years now in succession. We have not attempted to tax our way out of debt. We have continuously been paying our debt. I do not need to go over what Senator Nichols has said, which is absolutely the fact. We did not print money. We are not engaging in quantitative easing, as the economists would call it. We are not engaging in raping and pillaging the National Insurance Fund, as was done by others. We're not doing any of that. We are engaging in sound and well-established practices of economic and fiscal management of this country's affairs. The final thing that I want to say is to collide for just a few moments on the important issues of social. I don't think that any government or any representative of any government would stand in this place on any side, independent side, government side, they may do so on the opposition side, and attempt to make light and politicize issues relating to the relationship between crime and social and society and economic management. Mr. President, I must tell you that yesterday morning, when I was reading the newspaper, I don't usually read in great detail the crime, the court pages, but this particular story caught my attention. And it resonated with me, and so when Senator Thompson spoke, it reminded me of it. There was a young man, he was 18 years old, Mr. President, and he, along with a much older man, had gone off on a jaunt. This older person had picked him up this morning from wherever he lived and took him supposedly to go and pick fruit, to work, to have employment, to earn by legitimate means. He decided, and it is reported in the newspaper, and I hope it is correct, he decided that he didn't feel like picking fruit that day, and he decided that he was just going to rob the first person he saw. And he finished the statement by saying, "I is a different breed." That stayed with me, Mr. President, because there is a cadre of person who, as much as you would want to make sure that there are employment opportunities for everybody, they will tell you, like that young man, they are a different breed. They are not looking for employment. There is a cadre of person, and I hope to God that they are in the minority, that it does not matter how many construction gateway projects the government runs. It does not matter how many Barbados Vocational Training Board programs a government runs. It does not matter how many programs the Samuel Jackman Prescott Institute runs. It does not matter how much the government expands the Barbados Community College and puts more programs there. It does not matter how the government reinstates university access for all to have the ability to go to university. It does not matter how many free courses the National Transformation Initiative has. There are some in our society who will stand like this young man and say, "I don't feel like going and engaging in legitimate revenue-earning, income-earning activity. I can just rob the first body I see because I is a different breed." That is a reality that this country has to confront. When we are at a stage now where we are dealing with a cadre of persons who do not want to work, but are looking to take from those who are sacrificing, getting up when the days come, going to school, doing training, doing courses, learning a skill, learning a trade, running a small business, running a shop, going to university, earning, and then they want to take from them because them don't feel like picking fruit. That's a serious indictment, Mr. President, and this is why the government and all right-thinking Barbadians have been calling on Barbados to take an all-of-society approach, an all-of-Barbados, all-of-country approach. The economy is one thing. Liability fiscal management is one thing. There's highbrow conversations that we can have in here, and people can get up and they can grandstand, and they can try to score political points, and they can misread documents and misrepresent information. But at the end of the day, we still have to deal with that underbelly in this country that doesn't care about any of this stuff, because you know what the facts are, Mr. President? There are many people who will never see this debate in here today. There are many people who will never read a newspaper in which all of these things are being carried. There are many people who will never watch CBC News to see it carried on the news, who will not collide at any point in time with any official or authentic source of information. They will live in the shadows of the society, grasping information from people who know marginally less than they do, and from viral voice notes, Mr. President, which capture fractions of the truth and put it with a healthy dose of indignation and self-righteousness and create angst and more anger and everybody vexed and up in arms, but they're only fractions of facts. And I'm calling on the political parties that want to represent the people of this country to demonstrate a greater level of responsibility than we are seeing now in this country. This is an all-of-government approach. This is an all-of-country approach, and it is not a moment for us to camp out on either side of economy versus society, government versus private, home versus school, community versus household. This is an all-of-country approach, and I'm calling on all right-thinking Barbadians to realize that this has to take all of us putting our hands to the plow and making a commitment to make Barbados better. The government is committed, this government is committed, this Barbados Labour Party government is committed to focusing on ensuring that we have a macro environment that works for all. It works for the economy, it works for the society, it works for social, it works for health, it works for community, it works for everything. But we need people who sit wherever they sit in their respective spheres of influence to come together with a common goal of ensuring that these things trickle down to the lowest common denominator and that Barbados benefits and thrives from all of these interventions that we're making to ensure that Barbados has a fiscal space to spend on social infrastructure, our capital works programs, but also our people. And these are the submissions that I want to make today, Mr. President, and thank all of the colleagues for their submissions, and I beg to move that this resolution now do pass.
The question is that this resolution be now agreed to. Will all those honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. No. Methinks the ayes have it. This resolution is therefore now passed.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the sitting of the Senate is now suspended until 3:45 this afternoon.
The question is that this sitting be suspended until 3:45 p.m. today. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. The sitting is therefore adjourned until 3:45 p.m. today.